Hello and welcome to Straightforward, Levant TV's political talk show hosting Middle East experts, analysts and academics, and also activists or politicians. This week, and on the occasion of the month of Ramadan, British Muslims celebrate Ramadan, and it's also celebrated like other ethnic or religious occasions amongst Britain's multicultural fabric. The British Prime Minister addresses British Muslims every year on the occasion of Eid, which marks the end of Ramadan. Mr. Cameron stresses on celebrating diversity in Britain and the wealth of values that the British Muslim community has brought to the UK. But amongst Muslim figures in the country are some associated with terrorism, bigotry, double standards, and the attitude of not belonging to Britain, and even plans to convert Britain into an Islamic Empire. Amongst those is, of course, Muslim Preacher Anjem Choudary. He's often disowned by Muslims in Britain, but also often celebrated as a hero. During this brief episode today, we will look at Anjem Choudary as an example of disintegrated Muslims in the West and try to understand this phenomenon. Perhaps that would lead to some better ways of tackling this growing phenomenon that sooner or later will impose at least a psychological threat on liberal Western societies. So how did Anjem Choudary shift from an integrated and normal British student who had the odd night out, socializing with peers, having a couple of drinks and so on, to become a renowned Muslim preacher calling for Sharia law in England, Europe and the West even? Choudary, also dubbed, well, I'd rather skip, has been in various protests in London and Europe. As a prominent Muslim figure, he was hosted on the BBC's Hard Talk in 2005 following the terrorist attacks on the London Underground. At the time, I was watching and I was appalled by his answers, where he insisted he will not, quote, condemn my brother in Islam. I will not go through the rather aggressive approach of the media professionals, where interviewers and interviews ended up with Imam Choudary not very happy and things weren't very peaceful, with points not even made. I'd rather look at this from our own experience here at Levant TV. We hosted Choudary at our studio on my show Straightforward and over the phone as part of our daily press review, where in some cases Choudary promoted terror here on UK soil. So let's start from the Caliphate, or ISIS, the acronym for Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. In July 2014, and in a studio recording with Imam Choudary, we discussed the legitimacy of the Khalifa Baghdadi, who was back then not labelled as much of a terrorist in mainstream media, where journalists seemed a bit unclear whether ISIS was a terrorist group or an Islamic form of opposition in Syria, similar to the Muslim Brotherhood and other Islamic supposedly peaceful groups. Here at Levant TV, there were no grey areas. Choudary was challenged by the guests after his arguments that didn't go well. But before we look at those, let's see what he had to say on the Join ISIS campaign in London's Oxford Street last summer. What about London, which seems to be very tolerant to thoughts of...
I believe this is Khilaf al-Rashida ala minhaj al-nubuwah, meaning on the lines of the Prophet himself, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. I believe it's going to come to the West and even in London. And I believe, if you fear something, you should seek knowledge about it. And the Sharia is a beautiful religion.
So I then thought, wait a minute, is he really doing this on UK soil? But the UK today is fighting ISIS. They send Royal Air Force power to Iraq and they want to stop the ISIS. So, but at the same time, you are promoting ISIS in the UK, in central London. Don't you think this is a little bit un-British?
No. Yeah, of course, I don't subscribe to Western values. I don't believe in
but
democracy, freedom and secularism. I don't consider myself to be British. Remember, in Islam, we do not classify people according to their race or according to their look, how they look, or where they're born, or their resident, or where they get married. In Islam, we have Muslim or Kafir. That is the only distinction Allah made in the Quran.
Let me just clarify that Kafir means infidel, and according to him, every non-Muslim is a Kafir. Anyway, so I then presumed he'd be on the first flight to ISIS territory. I had to ask him this, and of course, being Christian, I referred to myself as Kafir as I asked the question. Let's see what he had to say. One last question, Anjem, from a Kafir like me. Are you planning to relocate to the Islamic State?
I would love to go and live under the Islamic State, under the Sharia. But the problem that we have nowadays, is that the West have always said, if you want Sharia, go back to your own countries. And now that we're trying to go back to our own countries, they're taking our passports away and putting us in prison. So they can't make up their minds. Either you want us to go,
so you want both options, basically.
Sorry?
So you prefer to keep the option open to return just in case?
Inshallah, one day I will make hijrah, and then you will hear from me, inshallah, from Darul Islam.
This sort of says it all. I needed not ask any more. Perhaps what summarizes all that is a comment we had on the video on YouTube.
You know, I would love to go and live under the Islamic State, under the Sharia, but the problem that we have nowadays, you know, is that the West have always said, if you want Sharia, go back to your own countries. And now that we're trying to go back to our own countries, they're taking our passports away and putting us in prison, so they can't make up their minds. Either you want us to go,
so you want
us
both
to stay.
options, basically?
Sorry?
So you prefer to keep the option open to return just in case?
Inshallah, one day I will make hijrah, and then you will hear from me, inshallah, from Darul Islam.
On ISIS and its ruler, the Caliph, Choudary had a mini debate with renowned Muslim activist Abdullah al-Andalusi, who clearly differed on his view on Caliph Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS. Let's recall this.
Muslims' desire to see the Khilafah is an obligation of Islam. The Sharia ruling is an obligation of Islam. These things are not contested. The really issue is assessing whether ISIS live up to that, this standard. Now, I mean, they don't have, anti-aircraft support. They can't defend themselves in that sense. The Khalif Ibrahim or Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, he can't go into public for any length of time because he could be killed, he could be executed. A caliph who's not even securing his own caliphate. That are the issues. Also, there are other issues which we are concerned about, such as use of or targeting of civilians.
But this is just not true, Abdullah. My dear brother Abdullah, this area is just not true, Abdullah. If you just allow me to just interject once. Brother, look, is this not true that they're not targeting civilians, The Jews and the Christians there are living side by side with the Muslims. We know people who are there.
Peace and tranquility, with so many other minorities being eradicated? Let's now go to Lebanon and Syria, where Mr. Choudary also had his say in a studio recording with us.
It's the same Lebanese regime who a couple of months ago...
Why do you call it regime?
Well, it is a regime because,
in what
because
sense?
of their actions.
Because
a couple of months ago, they laid siege to Tripoli and the north of Lebanon. They arrested many people, they killed many people, and great ulama who have been very open and didn't do any and haven't committed any crimes, like Sheikh Bakri Muhammad are today, ludicrous accusations in Lebanon, and they're being tortured and they're being humiliated. This is what we face under the non-Islamic regime. Allah said clearly in the Quran, those who rule by other than what Allah has revealed, they are the oppressors. So the oppression in Lebanon is because of the man-made law.
Seems he's got issues with man-made law. Our Lebanese guest, however, who was appalled by Chowdhury's statements, had to interject, starting with a British saying.
I love something they say here in this country, which says like, I despise what you think and what you say, but I am ready to die in a ditch to defend your right of thinking what you think and saying what you say. What they call it, accepting each other's.
Okay.
And that's what it should be.
This is your sentence.
I think,
well, let me
I think it's not this. Calling for fundamentalism and for hardliners to be to commit themselves into actions that they're not fully aware, because 16 and 17 years old, they're not really fully aware of what they're doing.
But obviously, of course, Mr. Choudary did not like it.
Say whatever you wish, I would die for what you say. We don't believe in this. You cannot insult the prophets of God.
I know.
You cannot insult.
That's where the difference between me and you.
Well, the difference is that you keep interrupting me because you don't like to hear the truth.
No,
the fact is that Muslims, unlike Christians, we don't insult the prophets of God. We don't eat pork, and we're not uncircumcised, and we don't eat anything from elephants to mosquitoes. And
well, I've never eaten a mosquito, but I've seen quite a few in some parts of London. So he not only defended Sharia law, he also believes it should be imposed in the Middle East, the cradle of Christianity. I mean, yes, Islam is big over there, but Jesus is supposed to be born in the Middle East. Speaking of Christianity, can you believe he was telling our other guests and the clergy interlocutors that they too will soon live under Sharia law?
What's wrong with Caesar being a Muslim implementing the Sharia?
Are you going to give me lectures on Christianity?
What's wrong with Caesar being a Christian?
That's really first.
What I would say to you is that, first of all, I'm happy that you said that Jesus prayed to Allah, because this proves that he's a messenger of God and not the son of God, which is what we believe.
Mother Agnes, we have a controversial Islamic figure in the studio with us, Anjem Choudary, based in the UK. Please address us and him on why observing minority rights shall be a red line that no rule should cross, be it a caliphate or any other form.
Well, of course, are you asking the question to myself?
Yes.
Are you asking me? Well, I will tell him, Imam or whatever, Your
Brother
Excellency.
Anjem Choudary.
Yes, Mr. Raji, I am happy. I can't see you, but maybe you can see me.
Yes.
You know, I believe in the power of spirituality, but whenever the spirituality, let it be Islamic, Christian, Jewish, Buddhist, or whatever, even the spirituality of Australasian, or in the jungle, any spirituality will induce us to more humanity. Because God is one, and He asked us to love each other, not to make discrimination. And you know, the takfir is not takfir just to kill the other. You can consider him as a sinner and try to make him come back to the right way, to the right path. So I am sure that you don't believe in violence. You don't believe in what is happening in our region. It's not possible.
And on Iraq and the eradication of Christians and other minorities, Mr. Choudary thinks it's fair that if those minorities are not liking it, they can leave. But let's see what our London-based guest thought of that.
Anjem drew my attention to something about Prime Minister Cameron saying that, referring that to kind of discrimination against the Muslims in the UK. With the same breath, you said that we asked the Christians in Iraq to live under the rules of the Islamic Sharia. If they don't like to live under the rules of the Islamic Sharia, let them leave. They have the freedom to leave. And I would invite you, I would invite you to think, if the people in the UK said to you, we live in a Christian country, we don't want to oppress you, you have to live by our rules and by our laws. If you don't like it, you have the right to practice your basic right of freedom of leaving. So how can you accept that such a thing is applicable in Iraq, but it's not applicable in the UK?
Anjem then went on to promote Islamic rule to the clergy, claiming everyone will be happy under Sharia law.
For your information, the Christians, the Jews who are living under the Sharia in the Dawla Islamiyya, which has been established, are very happy. Their life, their wealth, their honor has been protected.
Agree, Mother Agnes?
I think that, well, the thing is, you can't sit in Lebanon and judge. You need to go there to the area and speak to the people. I think you'll find that they're very happy.
And eventually, Mother Agnes Mariam Delacroix gave him a bit of a reality check.
No, this reality is in a reality, it's a virtual reality in your mind. The reality of the ground.
I think sanity is a blessing from Allah, you know.
No. You should come, and I will tell you something else. The first victims of Islamism, fundamentalism in Islam, are the Muslims themselves. And you don't say that they are not slaughtered. I am not prepared, but I can show you terrible, atrocious, horrendous acts that they have been doing against Muslims.
Charlie Hebdo, of course. How can we not forget all the tweets that supported the terrorist attacks in Paris on the free media? And while some were clear to voice the reasons they believe lie behind such terror attacks, Anjem Choudary seemed a bit confusing in his answer.
Unless you surveil every single individual in that country. So what we have to deal with is, because we can't prevent lone criminals taking matters into their own hands and doing nasty crimes, all we can try to do, and all any politician or any people can try to do, is try to reduce the causes which give rise to these individuals. And the causes are grievance, injustice, discrimination, and hate mongering against minorities in the West.
And as Islam has different factions and it can include different rhetoric, it's only fair to try and learn more of how they view these attacks in a democratic world. We are now joined by British lawyer and Muslim activist Anjem Choudary. Mr. Choudary, could you elaborate more on your recent tweets upon the Paris shooting?
Upon the shooting?
The Paris shootings, yes.
I mean, what I think that we need to understand in Islam is that there is a science called ikhtiyar, which is called assassination. And there are a number of people, really in the time of the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, like Ka'b ibn Ashraf, Abu Rafi al-Yahudi, Khalid ibn Sufyan, Asma bint Marwan, etc., who used to insult the Nabi.
I don't know those. I never met them. Never mind. So I then tried to get him to make a point and give a clear answer. He ended up having an argument over establishing Sharia law in the UK with Islamic activist Abdullah al-Andalusi. Let's have a look. Mr. Choudary, to what extent is the attack apart from being a criminal act, of course, even though you might not agree, to what extent it is a double standard act? I mean, you do support a Sharia law even here in Europe. You do praise the caliphate of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi in the Middle East. And you do accept that under that very caliphate, marginalizing minorities, including Christians, is very common. So if that caliphate called the Islamic State is ideal, why don't you tolerate what you call harassment of Muslims in the West, particularly France, known for a very well-established Christian history?
No, the Quran clearly says that if you fear treachery from people, you return back their covenant to be on equal terms. So for a Muslim to be not under the law of France or Britain or whatever, if they live there, they have to return back their covenant, return back their citizenship, return back their passport, leave the country. Then they can be on equal terms. They're not under the law. But as long as you accept the citizenship, then you are under the law. This is what the Quran argues, and I think the Quran's opinion is more authoritative, I think, than Al-Qaeda and ISIS and Baghdadi.
I know you don't want to implement the Sharia wherever you are, which by itself is really a statement of kufr to say you don't want the Sharia wherever you are.
I want Sharia for Muslims. I want Sharia for Muslims. Don't spin this. But Sharia has never been on non-Muslims. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he got the Torah and judged a Jew according to the Torah. So where was the Sharia then for non-Muslims there? The Sharia is not imposed on non-Muslims.
Yes.
Please refer to the example of the Prophet
Mr.
Muhammad.
Choudary, can you get back to my question, please? We got your point there with Mr. Andalusi. Can we get back to my main question, please?
I have to say, because at the moment, I can't hear a word. The brothers just speaking over me. So when you want to hear what I have to say, please phone me back, and then I can say my sentence. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Well, that's a first. He hung up the phone. If you look at Fox News, CNN, and most media outlets, it's usually the other way around. Something must have gone wrong there. That's interesting. So even when a Muslim is appalled by what Choudary says, the shock is incomparable to our English guest who heard it all. Let's see what he had to say. Mr. Spring, what do you have to say about this?
To be honest, I just feel somewhat depressed having listened to this gentleman just now. Because it appears to me, and I don't understand why, that Islam has some sort of problem about violence. Now, Christianity, you can make comments about the Crusades and all this sort of thing, but the essential and intrinsic leader of the Christian religion never advocated violence. Indeed, on the night he was betrayed, he told his apostles to put away their swords.
Talking about Jesus Christ,
yes.
Of course.
And what I'm trying to say is it seems to be a negative sort of image that is somehow projected of Islam when it's a religion presented as a religion of revenge.
And of course, the rest is history. Last week, Mr. Choudary harassed a London policeman over wearing a bracelet in support of the British Armed Forces. As this brief report comes to an end, I'll leave it to viewers to establish where is the thin line between tolerance and freedoms of minority groups and the protection of the freedoms and culture of hosting states. And perhaps think a bit of why do some minorities in the West call for the tolerance of practices, those that are viewed here as oppressing to women's rights, for instance, and other backward practices that are supposedly the reason behind those very individuals and groups like Anjem Choudary and his acolytes coming to the West in the first place. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned to Levant TV Straightforward, and bye for now.